I think we're only starting the journey right now. We've come from an era of being fairly parochial in our food safety approaches. We're getting global now, and we're bridging private and public much better than we ever have on a global basis, not on a national basis. Things like ISO 22000, a standard on food safety, is just growing every year in leaps and bounds. People are seeing the benefits of having finally one consistent approach for managing food safety in their organizations that's becoming more and more accepted. So I think it's just starting.
What is important is to make sure that there is a good partnership between private and public, because at the end of the day, governments are responsible for the safety of their citizens, so they are responsible for drafting and publishing some new regulation with regard to food safety. But it makes sense only if there is a backup from private sectors on the feasibility of all those standards.
The main challenge is to maintain that global approach with the participation of all countries, but also on all stakeholders, because if the private sector do not recognize that standards we adopt are useful, they will also develop different behavior, and we will lose everything.
We almost take food safety for granted, and that may be one of our issues. It's working properly, the systems are in place, but we should always be on the alert, because new issues emerge and we have to be alert at all times because the risk is not getting smaller.
The concern has been raised by particularly our developing country members on this growing number of private safety standards and the fact that they usually are much tougher than or exceed what the government has determined is necessary for safety. The other corollary concern is that these requirements, particularly from the private sector requirements, will require certification. Somebody has to be checking that the product has met the standards and certifying that it has met the standards. And the examples we have had presented to us are examples of exporters of fresh raspberries from Guatemala needing 16 different certifications in order to sell to 16 different potential markets and having to pay for each one each time.
There is a very strong cultural factor into defining food safety for the consumer. For the company, it's pretty obvious, and all the food manufacturing companies are talking the same language. But when you are asking the consumer what is the definition of food safety, some will answer that it has to be properly packaged. Some other will say that it has to be pasteurized. You know, you can have a different perception of what food safety is. And it's maybe our responsibility to give some information and to keep communicating to the consumer to explain what a real safe product is.
In many ways, food safety is crisis-driven. To use an example from the UK, the BSE crisis certainly led to changes in food safety in the UK and more widely. The problem with the cucumbers in Germany and how there was a lot of misinformation that went around. Nobody was quite sure what the cause of the outbreak was, but news of the outbreak spread very quickly. With social media, news is spreading faster, so if there is a food safety crisis, people hear about it more widely. For the consumer, there are advantages, but there are also disadvantages because you don't know which information is true.
Are we getting better? I don't know, because one of the reasons is also we are always going further as well. So what was acceptable 20 years ago might today not be acceptable anymore. So the further you go, the more things you see that can impact food safety, and the more complex it gets. So we have challenges today which we probably didn't have 20 years ago. So in that sense, almost like the medical world, the more they know about the human body, the more things they know that can be cured, and the easier you pick up on things.
I believe the one basic idea that would lead to more collaboration in advancing food safety would simply be that food safety is not a competitive advantage and that we all win or lose together.
The key aspect within the Global Food Safety Initiative in advancing global food safety is by bringing a whole array of stakeholders across sectors. So taking input from all those stakeholders would allow us to work collaboratively on solutions harmonized for the whole industry globally and benefiting from efficiencies across the board. That's how GFSI will contribute to advancing food safety collaboratively today and in the future.